All right, well, we're going to get started now. So hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to today's webinar on how to get the best picture for your live video stream. My name is Lena Kelly, and I'm the Digital Content Coordinator here at BoxCast. And part of what I do here is coordinate the webinar program. So I really do want to thank you so much for tuning in, for reading my emails. It means so much, and we're really excited to have you here. I want to emphasize that during today's presentation, we really want to hear from you and hear any questions you might have. So we encourage you to fill out questions on the right-hand side. There's that chat box. I'll be monitoring the questions throughout the stream. I'm not actually hosting today's webinar. That will be hosted by Josh Clements and Wade Clark. But we will be listening to every question you have. No question's a dumb question. If for any reason you don't want to share a question publicly, we'd be happy to field them from my email. So please email lena.kelly@boxcast.com, and I'll make sure that we can address as many questions as possible. We won't be addressing any questions during the webinar itself or during the presentation itself, but we'll have a question and answer section at the very end of the webinar. So make sure you stay all the way through that. This webinar is part of our larger webinar program, and we do that with the intention of educating you and anyone else out there on everything we can about streaming. So we've had a webinar about the best video equipment for streaming. We've had a webinar about ways to increase your viewership, and today we're really excited to talk to you about how to produce the best picture quality for your stream. Like I mentioned before, I'm not the person actually hosting the webinar. For that, I tossed it off to the men of the hour, Josh Clements and Wade Clark, and they are our in-house video experts. The two of them have been working in video production for a really long time, and they'll actually give you a little bit of background about themselves right now. So Josh and Wade, here you go.
What's up?
Hello, good
How's it
morning.
going?
Good afternoon, actually, I guess.
All right, here we are. Men of the hour. I love that description. That's always my favorite. So my name is Josh Clements. Thanks again for joining. I'm a video content specialist here at BoxCast, and I produce live videos and post-produce work as well.
And I am Wade Clark, and I'm actually a technical support analyst here at BoxCast. So if you ever chat in, shoot an email, give us a call, you might actually get me to respond to you and help you troubleshoot your issues. Fun fact about me and Josh is we actually started a video production company 4 years ago in college. And it was actually, I think our anniversary date is coming. I think it's the 28th, May 28th. Okay. So it's coming in like 4 days.
Happy almost anniversary.
Happy almost 4-day, or 4-year anniversary.
4 years. So yeah, so Wade and I, like Lena said, there's no such thing as a dumb question. Wade and I at one point started out without knowing anything, not even how to use a camera. So at any point during this, if you have something that comes to mind, please feel free to ask at the end of the presentation. We'll try to get to as many things as we can. And looking back in my past, there's so many things I wish I would have asked, and I was like, oh, that's stupid, I shouldn't ask that, But please don't be scared, don't be shy. So without further ado, we're actually going to take ourselves off the screen here and hop into our PowerPoint. So how to get the best picture quality for your stream. So what are we doing today? Well, our philosophy is that it's not just your equipment that makes your stream look good, but it's what you do with that equipment. So you can purchase awesome cameras, you can purchase the most expensive stuff in the world, but once you have that, you've got to know what to do with it. And in fact, the more expensive gear you buy, the more you might realize you need to understand about video production in general. And I'm sure you would agree, live video streaming, especially, the more expensive it gets, actually the more complicated it gets, and the more technical you have to be. So we're going to try to give you some building blocks today. Our goal is to review the fundamentals of creating a quality live video stream. And this is all introductory, so we highly recommend you work with some of the stuff we're teaching you today. Take it home with you, get your camera out, get your equipment out, and actually try to apply some of it. Because all of this is very entry level, if you will. Yeah,
we're basically going to scrape the surface of a couple topics and just to get you into knowing some of the terms that you might have heard before, but you don't exactly know what they mean.
Yeah. So we'll hop into the agenda here. And we're going to be going over kind of a wide array of stuff today. Everything from making sure you have a good network connection to, making sure you're framing your shots right and everything aesthetically looks good. And then we'll hop into color and light, and that's stuff that happens in the camera. So white balance, ISO, iris, exposure. And then we'll discuss a little bit of audio today too, because we think it's just as important. So So let's talk about network first. Why do we think that's most important? Well, anytime Wade and I go to a venue for the first time, if we're live streaming an event, more importantly than what the shots are going to look like or where we're going to set up our cameras or anything, most important is what does the network look like and what is the status of the network? Because without it, it doesn't matter. Your viewers won't have a good experience with a poor network experience. It's the one thing that you're using to stream. So we'll discuss upload speed, quality of service, speed testing, and then hardline and Wi-Fi connections. So let's hop right into upload speed. Well, a common misconception with the internet is that it's just one big magical thing. And if you have a good internet connection, it's just good either way. But there's actually two ways of sending and receiving information in the internet, and it's called upload speed and download speed. So download speed refers to receiving data on the internet, so like, watching Netflix or opening up a website or receiving a photo, et cetera, et cetera. That's what download speed actually refers to. That's the medium you're using. And then upload speed actually refers to sending information. So we're more concerned with upload speed and live video streaming because you're outputting video, over the internet to our servers. So actually, we're going to show you a quick little chart here that gives you kind of a rough idea of different upload speeds that'll work in the different video qualities that you'll expect to get out of them. Now, one thing I'd like to mention, you see I have a little asterisk here by the 1.5 megabits per second. One thing I'd like to bring up is the fact that your upload speed actually is usually supposed to be greater than these numbers. These numbers are the upload speeds we recommend that are specifically for your live video stream. So if you want to get a 720p stream out there, your max upload speed can't be 3 megabits per second, if that makes sense. Same thing, with an HD stream, you can't just have a 5 megabits per second because other people might be on the network and other people might be doing other stuff with that. So that's just one thing to know about upload speeds. And going back to people using the network in itself, we'll talk about quality of service. And what I mean by that is just prioritizing your BoxCast encoder so that you can get priority on the network. So what does quality service mean? Well, the primary goal of QoS is to provide priority, including dedicated bandwidth, to a specific device. In this case, your BoxCast encoder. The reason this is important is because, like I said, other people in your network might be using email, they might be uploading their own videos, and they might be doing a variety of different stuff that is actually going to eat away at your dedicated available bandwidth.
Yeah, and I would say in this day and age, getting a dedicated line or dedicated network speed for your encoder or your live stream is really, really important. Now everyone can pull out their phone and just do a little Facebook Live video, which is, and if they're on the Wi-Fi there, they're taking your upload speed and stuff like that. So you want to just be able to get your own kind of like line out, essentially.
Yeah, right. So if you have an IT team or a network company that you work closely with, you can certainly reach out to them to get quality of service on your BoxCast encoder and make sure that that stream is getting priority over everything else, all the other traffic happening within the network.
So next thing we'll go into is speed testing your network. This is a really, really good tool if you're thinking about live streaming, and this will let you know if you have a strong enough connection or if you need to talk to your internet provider about upgrading your your upload and download speed. Generally, basically all a speed test is just measuring your upload and download speed on your network. So we'd recommend, doing that either through Wi-Fi or if you can plug your computer in via an Ethernet cable, then that's a really good way to get a gauge on your network. Because sometimes you forget what plan you may have signed up for, or your internet service provider is saying, hey, we're giving you 10 megabytes upload speed, and you do a test and you get only maybe a megabyte upload. And this is off. This is why maybe my live streaming is not going so well.
So that's something I would just say that's something that you might want to do before every live stream, especially if it's extremely important. Just test it out every now and then because your internet service provider is going to give you a wide variety of speeds, and you're going to experience like a lot of different types of speeds I don't know how to word that correctly, I
Well-
guess.
well, you-
But you're going to have a varied experience with your internet. Anytime, I'm sure, within my home network, anytime I'm watching something, sometimes it's really slow and out of the blue, and you don't want to be caught in a situation where, I have a stream in 5 minutes, and all of a sudden everything is looking terrible and everything's moving really slow.
Yeah, and always remember to test when it's high traffic areas. So if you're going to be streaming basketball games, go there and do a test when there is a basketball game so you can get a gauge of that network. And just to go into 2 websites you can go and test, there is speedof.me and speedtest.net, generally the 2 sites we use. And also actually Google now has a speed test where you literally just type in speed test to Google and you can run one right there on their homepage. But really, we do this, as Josh mentioned, before we go to any new venue, we try to test the network.
Yeah, and right here you'll see, I'll just bring a little pointer up, you'll see right here they give you a clear indicator of what you're getting for upload and what you're getting for download. And we did this in our office, and here we'd be like, going back to those 2 slides before, we'd be like, okay, great. Now I can at least know, there's probably plenty of room for 5 megabits up with a 15 megabit upload speed. There's plenty of room for my stream to go live, and I could probably stream in 1080p. So that just kind of ties all that together.
Yeah, so let's talk about 2 types of connections that you should be pretty familiar with if you are planning on live streaming. There's hardlining versus Wi-Fi. As you can see, we put the greater symbol for hardlining because if you can hardline, please try to do that. If you're going to a new venue or you're setting up your live streaming spot or area, make sure you can get a router and modem close to you, or at least be able to run a 100 or 200 foot Ethernet cable over to your area to plug into your encoder. With our box, you'll actually see, here's a picture of our BoxCaster. We have it plugged in right here. And even for this webinar, we have it plugged in just to be safe. Our internet is pretty good here. We've done some tests on Wi-Fi, but we just want to make sure that it looks good for you guys. And that is just generally the safest way to get across a live stream.
But there are situations where Wi-Fi is better, right?
Yes, there are, unfortunately. So here's a real-life example. I had to do this about 2 months ago. I was live streaming for a client, and the bar manager assured us that the internet was going to be great. It's going to awesome internet, excellent speeds. You'll be fine live streaming in HD. Okay, so we go there and test. The first thing, like I said, we do is I plug into their router and I test the BoxCaster. It looked like we were actually only getting about 800 kilobytes to 1 meg of speed from them. So that's not even enough to get up a 480p stream. It will go live, but it will look very pixelated, very blurry, not so great. So what did we do? What are you going to do if you can't get a hard line or an Ethernet cable to work? Well, if that connection's not going to work for you, you could get something like a Verizon hotspot or an AT&T hotspot, and this actually saved us that day. The only downside to that is, once again, you are reliant on a Wi-Fi network, and you're using your data, so now you're spending more money that maybe you didn't budget for or something like that. Right. But like I said, in this case, we had to actually use a Verizon Jetpack. Thank God we had one with us, and it ended up streaming just fine. So to go actually into our next topic, which is framing.
Well, I was just gonna say that kind of goes back to, you had mentioned that the bar manager was like, oh, we've got a great internet connection, and that goes back to the common misconception that people have that, a good internet connection is a 2-way thing, and if I have good internet and I can watch Netflix on my laptop in HD, then I'll be able to live stream. But that's not true. Sometimes, that bar very well may have had a great download speed, but their upload speed that they had available was obviously not good enough for live streaming. And that's why it's good to understand the difference between the two.
Absolutely. So, as I said, to go into our next topic, framing and composition, you can see here that this was not a very good setup for us. We walked in, and we were, as you're in a crowded bar with about 100 people, where are you going to put a camera? Well, we ended up being on a stand, and here's the bandmates. You can barely kind of see them. So Josh is going to actually talk about a better way to frame and kind of show aesthetically where you should put people in a live stream.
So framing and composition, what are we talking about? It's really about making sure aesthetically that you're providing the best experience for your viewers, making sure your subjects are in the right spot and your camera's like pointed in the right direction and stuff like that. So what we'll talk about there is the rule of thirds, headroom and lead room, and then shot types. Let's go into the rule of thirds. What is the rule of thirds? Well, basically what it does is it breaks up the video into thirds vertically and horizontally. And why this is important is because what it does is it balances your shots. they become more balanced, and then it enables a viewer to interact with it more naturally. So some studies have actually showed that if something is perfectly centered in a shot, weirdly enough, that people are actually going to draw their eyes to these intersection points right here, if that makes sense. So you're going to want to put points of interest around these dots. And you're going to want to make sure things line up vertically and horizontally with these vertical and horizontal bars right here. So that's kind of what the rule of thirds is. It's really basic, and it's important to understand overall. So,
Yeah, I would say the only time you maybe put someone directly in the middle is if you were to, if they were talking, you had a camera straight on them, and they were talking, and when they're looking left or looking right to the crowd, you're giving them enough lead room and you're giving them enough space to look around. But really, if you just have the camera directly in front of them and it's more straight on.
Okay. And that's just a general guideline. Don't try to follow that perfectly. So here's another example of the rule of thirds. It's very basic. This is in the movie Thor. You can see Thor is grabbing his famous Thor hammer, and you've kind of got the shot centered on his chest right here, and he's lined up with this vertical line, and it matches just perfectly in the frame. So this tactic is probably used more in cinematography than it is live video, but it's still a good guideline to follow. Some cameras will actually allow you to display this grid when you're shooting, but you don't need to follow it religiously. Just use it as a guideline. If you don't have the grid on your camera, just kind of like picture it there and kind of try to follow things in that method. From here, we'll move on to headroom and lead room. Headroom just refers to the margin of space that is existing between the head and the top of the frame. So too much headroom, like going back to Wade's picture right here, too much headroom can be a bad thing. It can make things look minuscule. You don't even notice the band is in the frame, and sometimes it makes people look really short, which isn't the best. And then not enough headroom can kind of cut things off or make it look uncomfortable or too close to the top of the frame. So just giving someone a nice, comfortable padding between them and the top of the frame is good to always think about when you're shooting someone. And then lead room. What does lead room refer to? Well, if you have a subject and he's facing a certain direction, or he's talking in a certain direction, you want to point the camera to, you want to give more space on the side of the direction that he's talking to. I guess that's a weird way to word that.
Wow. I was going to say, basically, if they're talking to a crowd, you want to have the camera, you want to have the subject on this scene, on the left-hand side here, and the crowd is obviously in front of him. To the right side, he's talking out to them. You don't want him ever talking directly off camera. You want him kind of keeping him in the frame.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then we'll move on to another example of lead room. We are based out of Cleveland, Ohio here at BoxCast, so we're not crazy about the Yankees, but I will just show this picture right here of a pitcher pitching, and you can see the space that he's throwing to. There's more space on the left side, and if you had this frame just cut off like right around here, it would look a little weird. You'd be like, well, where is he throwing? And it would be visually kind of off. So that's just a simple rule to follow, and it's nothing too technical.
Alrighty, next we're going to show you kind of some shot types that you could use in your live streaming environment. Anything from like an extreme close-up to a full shot you'll see here. But let's just kind of jump right into them. So right here I have all the close-up shots kind of combined in one slide. We've got extreme close-up, full close-up, and a close-up. Generally, you're probably not going to use a full close-up and extreme close-up in live streaming unless you're maybe doing a really, really dramatic interview or anything like that. But you can see these shots are a little more intense, a little more intimate. A close-up like of the Joker, you might be doing something like that. Once again, it just kind of depends on how many cameras you have, what your setup's like, and kind of what the environment's like. So another shot that I think is kind of for live streaming, more so artistic, is this cowboy to / full medium shot. You really, once again, I would say it all depends on your environment, and if you have an extra camera to play around with, most certainly try something like this on the pitcher or the quarterback or someone like that, presenter. But generally, you're actually going to want to stick to some shots like this. So at the last graduation we live streamed, these were kind of our three main shots we used with 3 cameras. We had our wide shot up top, which I would say was kind of like our save our butt shot, just in case anything unexpected happened that we weren't planning on, we could always jump to that and switch another camera around. And then at the bottom on the left, you'll see the full shot here, which gets the full subject in frame. So let's just imagine that, your son or daughter was graduating college that day. You'd want to see a shot more like this, or even more of like a medium shot than something like this. This up here is really just to catch, a general frame of the action. But if you saw your son and daughter walking across the stage, you might not even be able to see their face. You want a good close-up shot like here. And then once again, you kind of already saw this one, but the medium shot is just a really good solid shot if you're doing a 2-camera setup. You could jump between this shot and maybe this shot.
I would actually say that the general rule you could think of is the farther away you are, the less emotion you're going to draw out of the speaker, and the closer you are, obviously, as if you were closer to them in real life, you're gonna feel their emotion a little more, read their facial, type of features and stuff like that, and pick up more on what they're saying. So, and the farther you are, the more you're just setting the stage and kind of developing scenery and making people kind of get an idea of the environment you're in. But if you don't have a great environment that you're streaming in, or it doesn't look that great, I wouldn't even go with a wide shot. I would just keep it on the speaker the whole time. But if it is a nice looking setup and there's flowers like there are here, and the lighting on the stage is really good, and you've got some people over here to the left, you want to show that. So let's hop into the manual settings. When we started getting cameras for the first time, we would see all these buttons on these cameras that you can see over here, and it was extremely intimidating, and we'd be like, what do we even do with these? It's a little overwhelming when you get a camera for the first time. And if we wouldn't recommend streaming on a DSLR here, but even if you're shooting on a DSLR, you can look at all this stuff and you're like, whoa, what does that even mean? How about I just stick to auto, point and shoot, and not worry about it? But we want to teach you what some of this stuff can mean and how it can, improve the quality of your picture. And what I'd like to say is all 4 of these things we'll be going over today are universal for any camera that has manual settings. So that's really nice. Okay, great. So we'll go through white balance. We'll go through ISO/gain, which basically mean the same thing. One is just a term for photography. One is a term for video, but they have the same meaning and they have the same function. And then we'll talk about shutter speed, and then we'll talk about aperture and iris. Again, aperture and iris, if you see those terms, they're interchangeable. One is just a video term, one's a photo term, but essentially they mean the same thing. So let's hop into white balance here. Basically what white balance is referring to is making your colors look natural, as if they look in real life, if you will. And you'll see the picture on the left. This picture is white balance because the whites on the coffee mug are actually white. The picture on the right is not white balance because it's a little warm. Maybe it's a warm day. Maybe it's really hot out. Maybe the lighting in the scenery is actually just kind of older and they're using actual older bulbs. But the goal is to get this to look white, as if it would in real life, and it's as if it was a natural white. So we actually just took some samples here because, I'm really looking to get started in my music career, and I'd like to just kickstart that with an album cover here. Really nice dramatic shot of me looking off into the distance.
Yeah, and I would say you can definitely email josh.clemens@boxcast.com to pre-order his album. It's coming out this fall.
Yeah. Please check it out. I haven't picked the genre of music yet, but it's going to be something really good. Sorry to get sidetracked there, but you can see on the left the picture's really cold. And everything in white balance is measured in Kelvin, so you're always a lower Kelvin for white balancing means a colder image, and a hotter image is going to have a higher Kelvin rating at 9,500. So you can see the one on the left is a little too cold. This one here is a little too warm, and what you're looking for is adjusting the white balance to where it looks just right. We shot this in daylight, so it's around 5,800K to where the white balance is set to, and 5,600K, which is referred to as the daylight setting, and it's the most natural form of light. That's why that looks more natural at 5,800 right here. And that might even be a little too warm, I'm not sure, but this is a good idea. It gives you a good idea of what you can adjust. And I think one thing, Wade's made a good point in the past too, is different cameras have different white balance settings. So if you're using different cameras, you might have to go in manually and adjust those.
Yeah, by that I mean if you leave your cameras on auto and let's say one camera looks a little bluer and one camera looks a little warmer, you might have to have them meet in the middle and kind of even out that white balance Kelvin and just see which one, and try to make them look the same as possible. I mean,
Yeah.
we've definitely used 2 or 3 cameras and one just kind of looks off and you got to kind of adjust it to make it look the same color as the other guys.
Yeah. So again, like on any camera you're going to use, you can make these types of adjustments, and you can look for similar values and different things like that.
So next we're going to jump into ISO and gain. And really, this is just going to be how sensitive your camera's sensor is to light. Some sensors are better than others, and that kind of comes with a price jump and when you get another camera. But as you see here, the average range we try to shoot in is between 100 to 6400. You may have seen that setting on your camera before, but the reason we want to go with 100 is because there's less noise, which I will show you some examples of that in a second. But really, when you're at that 100 mark, there's less noise, graininess, kind of pixelation in the background of the image. And then when you start to get past that 6400 mark, you start to see in the background, the image starts to just kind of warp a little bit. So really, the less ISO you have, the little light that comes into the camera, but the more ISO, you gain more light, but you gain more noise. So in this in this chart, actually, it does a really good job of showing you the noise comparison. So here's 100 ISO. As you can see, pretty clear image, looks really good, but at 25,000 ISO, I mean, it is super, super grainy. I mean, you almost never want to get that high on the settings in your camera. And sometimes you do to compensate for light, but if anything, just try to add external lighting. Try to add LED panels or soft boxes or anything just so you can bring that noise or ISO down.
Yep.
So,
and if you thought you were done seeing my face, you're wrong.
yes. So this is actually the back of Josh's album cover, more of a serious photo. But as you can see here, here's a shot at ISO 800. And obviously these are photos, so video is going to be a smidge different. I actually think with video, you're going to see more noise is what they like to call it, which this is what we're referring to when we talk about noise. If you can see, this is just a little more pixelated, kind of graininess. Josh's face is even not really that much more in focus. This just looks more natural, a little smoother.
Yeah.
Overall, a better shot with a lower ISO.
Yeah, it's going to be less destructive, way less destructive if you shoot at a lower ISO, but you're going to lose light by lowering that setting. So you're just looking for a sweet spot in between the two.
So next we'll talk about shutter speed, another kind of very important manual setting, especially for sports, I would say. So shutter speed really affects how much motion blur is in each frame or each video frame of your shot, and it's also measured in fractions of a second. So as you can see down here, this is 1/1000th of a second, so it's really, really quick. So if you are live streaming sports and stuff, you generally want to have a higher shutter speed. As you can see here too, general rule of thumb is if you're shooting in 30 frames per second or 24 frames per second, those are kind of the common two, you want your shutter speed to be double that. So, we'll go back to the sports example. If you were in 1/8 or 1/4 of a shutter speed, you may be gaining more light for your subjects, which if it's a dark day, might be a good thing, but then you're going to see all this motion blur, and it's going to almost be unclear when they're running across the field.
Yeah, I wouldn't even mess with shutter speed in video too much if you have a lot of movement. If it's a still shot or anything like that, then it's totally okay. But otherwise, I wouldn't even play with it.
Right. So, and this is kind of a good example. As you can see, this is shot in a really, really slow shutter speed. And you can't even tell if this is a man or woman, essentially. So,
and nobody wants that.
And nobody wants that. So in this one, there's a faster shutter speed, so you can see it's clearly a woman riding a bike. It's just kind of a good example to show you what would happen if you were filming in a very, very low shutter speed. You get this motion blur.
Absolutely. So the next thing we'll do is we'll talk about iris and aperture. And everybody watching, if you just want to do me a quick favor, and I'm going to explain it. If you don't understand what it means, I'm going to explain it in the dumbest way possible. But if you want to do me a quick favor and take your finger and point it really close to your face, as close as possible to your face, and go ahead and just stare at the tip of your finger. I promise this has some sort of application. So stare at it, and then what's happening here is you can see like the iris of your eye is opening up a little more. You're taking in a little more light, and there's more detail. And then everything around your finger is blurred. Now, if you can go ahead and just pull your finger all the way back to as far as your arm can go, you'll notice that things are starting to come in focus more, and you're probably closing the iris of your eye more, if you will. I'm not a biologist or a human biologist, but I think that's how it works. But that's basically what's happening in your camera. Aperture and iris determine depth of field, and it's literally determining the size of the opening within the lens that light's entering in. And you can see this little symbol right here. This is actually what an aperture ring kind of looks like in a camera. It'll open and close just kind of like that. It's measured in f-stops, which looks like a really crazy technical term like f1.4, f2.0, but it's really not. The basic thing to understand is the lower the number of an f-stop, the more shallow the depth of field you're going to get in your image. And I'm going to show you some real life examples here. So this is my dog. I'm very, very proud to show any picture of her at any given moment, at any chance that I get. So obviously I'm going to use a picture of my dog here. But this is shot at f1.8. And we'll see here everything is very blurred out in the background. We actually shot this in a dark room, and that's how we're able to get a brighter picture out of a dark room, is by raising the aperture. And you'll even notice at such a low aperture that even her nose here is kind of blurred out a little bit, but we get her eyes and we get her ears, and then everything else, like this piece of furniture in front of her is blurred out. Everything in the room is blurred out behind her. So that's what aperture is doing, just like the same thing as the example that I told you with the finger. But if we're at a low aperture, we're letting more light in. If we go to a high aperture, we're actually letting less light in. So this is shot at f20, and you'll see that this is a picture taken out of our office here at Burke Lakefront Airport. So we get a great view of the city. And if I want to take a picture like this, I'm going to raise my aperture, effectively closing the ring, and then I'm going to get more detail out of everything in the image. So all of these buildings are really far apart, and we even get some detail in the clouds here, but everything is in focus. So pretty simple way to understand aperture. And to close out the manual settings, I've got all these little dudes here. And I'll just explain this in the simplest way I possibly can, because I understand that learning all of these at once can be a little complicated. And again, go back, take your camera home, actually put it into practice. So at a higher ISO, you're going to get more light and more noise. So this dude here is a little brighter, but he's also got some noise in the background here. At a lower ISO, you're going to get less light and less noise. So he's darkened a little, but you got rid of that grain. At a higher shutter speed, you're going to get less light, but less motion blur. So, like he is a little darker, but you don't have the issue with him running and getting blurry. But at a lower shutter speed, you're going to get more light and more motion blur. And then down here, all the dudes are running around. At a higher aperture, we get less light and more detail in the image. More things in the background are in focus. There's more depth of field. And then at a lower aperture, there's more light and more depth of field. And this guy right here, he's in focus, but everybody else is not. And you're going to have very specific things that are in focus with that.
So lastly, we're going to just touch on it very briefly. It's just a quick slide about audio. We want to just say that with live streaming, bad audio can really ruin a viewer's experience, especially I would say with sports especially. I get a lot of viewers who call in all the time and who ask questions, why is there no audio? Or why is the audio too hot? Why can't I hear the audio? And generally, they always want a refund, even when there's no audio. But with sports, you can still see the action, you can still tell what's going on. But if they have a bad audio experience, they sometimes want a refund. This is obviously extremely important if you're having a speaker, too. You want to get the audio directly from a microphone or directly from a soundboard, just due that you can hear them very clearly and you're not picking up all this background noise or camera internal or the camera mic audio. So we just want to touch on it. I mean, I think audio could be a whole webinar in itself, but we just want to say it really is just as important as video.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll go to some questions now.
And we want to thank you guys too.
Oh, and thank you so much for watching and taking your time out of your day to listen to us talk. So we'll go to a first question here we got from Terry. Terry asks, when shooting multicam shots, does the picture look better if you use the same camera model / brand? The short answer is yes, but yes, I mean because the color profiles in the camera are going to be the same and everything is going to line up. if you use the same brand, you're going to have better luck than if you use different brands because they're just made differently. But I will say that, again, going back to these manual settings that I kind of explained to you, you can trick some of your cameras to look a lot like other ones. We did a 2-camera interview probably about 2 weeks ago, and we were shooting on a Canon 5D Mark III and a Sony NEX EA50, 2 completely different cameras, but we were able to go in and adjust the white balance settings on both cameras and the exposure to both of them to where the colors looked pretty similar to where you would have to, you'd have to have a mad scientist kind of tell the difference between the two. So it is always better to buy 2 of the same camera, I would say, but I also understand that you might not even anticipate the fact that you're buying another camera years down the road, or you know what I mean?
Right. Like, we have a different array of cameras in our arsenal just because I don't think, back when we started 4 years ago, we weren't like, in 4 years we're going to be live streaming, live events, we should buy 3 of the same cameras. But if you have the budget for that and you can find 3 cameras that suit your needs and fit that budget, or 2 cameras, 3 cameras, 4 cameras, buying the same one model and brand is usually pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, so next question we got here is from a George. It says, my picture always seems grainy, so it sounds like an ISO problem. How can I fix that? I would definitely
we're gonna talk now.
We forgot to switch.
Sorry, we're back. Hi.
Yeah, we're still here. It's not a recording, but anyway, so I'll repeat the question. George asked us, my picture always seems grainy, so it sounds like an ISO problem. How can I fix it? I would honestly, sometimes you can fix it with the camera settings, but if you're not finding that successful, add more lighting to the scene. We actually have 2 LED panels kind of pointed at us just because we know that the FaceTime camera here is not super reliable, not super great, obviously. So just try to add more light to the subject. I know that can be hard depending on your setting. If you're outside shooting sports, obviously it's a little bit harder to add lights to the field.
Yeah.
But if you're inside, definitely try to throw some lights that aren't going to distract the crowd, but also just help the audio.
Yeah, and a lot of ISO grain appears actually in darker images, like blacks and whites. So here, you could probably maybe see a little more grain on this dark blue right here, more than on this white. So the darker the color, the more grain's going to appear. So if you can point light as much as you can at those dark spaces, you're also going to get rid of it to a good degree. But more light, more external light is probably always the answer. So the next question, John asks, if I don't know what upload speed I need, how can I figure that out? If I don't have the recommended upload speed, how can I get it?
I can answer that.
Okay.
So if you don't know the upload speed you need, how can I figure that out? So definitely go back to that speed testing. Test your network with your laptop. Try to plug in Ethernet right into a router. See if that works first. If you're not getting the upload speeds you need to maybe have a successful live stream, talk to your internet service provider about upgrading your internet. Maybe they'll tell you, hey, we gave you 2 upload and 12 download. So now let's see, how much is 10 upload and 50 download, or 10 upload and 100, or 10 upload and 100 download, essentially just to get that full quality stream. So I would really just kind of talk to your internet service provider. Or a great example of that is at at my apartment, we had 10 upload and we have 100 download, but for some reason it wasn't working well and we were getting terrible internet connection. So I called the company and they actually said it was a line going into the apartment. So it wasn't the modem, it wasn't the router, it wasn't us. It was literally the line that they have to run from the box outside all the way up and into the apartment. So sometimes they just need to change that out, and now our internet works great. So.
Yeah, it is. Sometimes there are things happening outside of even the physical location you're in. And if you call and complain enough, then you'll get good results. So, if I would also say, John, sorry for the pause there. I would also say, if you are not able to pay for additional upload, or you can't, or there's some issues within the network itself, go back to that quality of service thing we talked about. So try to get somebody within your network team. Where's it at? This is a long presentation. Try to get somebody within your network team to give dedicated bandwidth to. That would be a really good way to do it.
So I will answer this question from Kelly, it looks like. I work in a church and don't want to use the camera mic to pick up my pastor. What's the best way to get audio to a BoxCaster? It actually, probably the best way to do it
I
is...
would use a wireless mic system from your pastor,
Yeah.
and then I would send that wireless mic into your camera. There's probably an audio input on your camera somewhere, and the receiving end of that wireless mic can actually take an audio input, and then that would output that audio over HDMI into your BoxCaster.
Right,
It's
yeah.
probably the easiest way if you're doing a one-camera shoot.
Right, or also always check to make sure there's not a soundboard. A lot of churches have soundboards or something, so if you can always plug directly into the sound that everyone else is hearing out of the speakers, that's always great. Sometimes that includes some extra cables like an RCA cable or an XLR cable. But generally, if you can plug right into their mic, or like Josh said, if you want to make it pretty simple, you can just lob up the, you can just put a lavalier mic on the pastor and just have them talk directly into the camera. That's what we actually do with a lot of weddings. Not that we're live streaming them, but we mic them up because it's directly from the source.
Yeah, exactly. Nick asks, my camera has auto white balance. How much of the screen do I need to fill with something white for auto white balance to work properly?
I was going to say that is a tricky one, just due to I feel like most cameras auto white balance a little differently.
They all white balance quite differently. Nick, if you reach out to us at questions@boxcast.com, I can send you some ways to white balance your camera properly. But it's not really about how much you're pointing at white objects necessarily. It's just about making sure the color temperature of the image is correct as if you would see it in real life. So there doesn't have to be any whites in your picture at all for it to be white balanced. I know that might be a little bit of a confusing term, but if you reach out to us at questions@boxcast, we can send you some articles and different things to get it to work properly.
All right, this one, it looks like Lena wrote here, CWPA water polo. If you have the proper upload speed, what else could be causing pixelation when streaming? We struggle with heavy pixelation due to the water always moving. I would say test some camera settings again. Maybe the shutter speed is a little lower than you'd like, and you just need to up the shutter speed just a little bit so there's not that motion blur. Also, with dealing in technical support, feel free to actually, like Josh said, reach out at questions@boxcast.com, and I could help you troubleshoot maybe your network a little bit. Generally, what that means is I'd be really interested to see what you're actually plugging your live stream equipment into. Is it a wall switch? Are you going off Wi-Fi? Are you doing a wireless hotspot? If it's coming directly from the router or modem, like I mentioned, sometimes you just need to run a quick speed test, and your internet's supposed to be giving you 20 megabytes upload. You do a speed test, and for some reason you're only getting 4 or 5 or something. It's definitely one of those conversations where I'd love to know your setup. So shoot a question over to questions@boxcast.com, and I'm sure we could troubleshoot it together. But that's what I'd recommend.
Yeah. Then Vanessa asks, for a speaker that is talking and moving naturally, what's the best shutter speed? If I'm shooting in 30 frames per second, would it be 160, or should I increase that if they're moving back and forth?
I would think that would probably definitely be enough.
I think that would be plenty, although, like I said, if you go back to these are all things that you have to adjust with one or the other. So if you actually want to increase your shutter speed a little more, you could also open up your aperture a little bit more and get more light out of the image without sacrificing light. Or you could increase the ISO too, depending on your camera's native ISO range. So it's not necessarily just about playing with the shutter speed, although that's 160 sounds like it'd be pretty good. It's also about making these adjustments here in the ISO range and here in the aperture range and seeing how much you can get out of it. Because if it's just one speaker and he's not necessarily moving back and forth, or upstage and downstage, then you could probably get, you could probably raise your aperture quite a bit to where he's just in focus. And then I got a question from Elijah. How do I use a compressor to balance audio volume for the band and the speaker? Elijah, actually, if you want to reach out to us at questions@boxcast.com, we can actually troubleshoot that with you a little more in depth, and we probably could do a good job on the webinar.
Yeah, it's a little different with each compressor and each kind of audio soundboard, I
Yeah,
would say.
I don't really have a one-size-fits-all answer, but I'd really love to help you with that. If you just want to shoot us an email or give us a call.
So, this is a question from Jerome. Would you recommend AT&T versus Verizon versus T-Mobile to use a Wi-Fi hotspot to upload a stream to BoxCast? How much data would be used on a Wi-Fi hotspot? So,
What is it, 2 gigs an hour?
I think that's about right.
It would
Yeah.
probably be about 2 gigs of video an hour.
And I would say from the AT&T Verizon
hour video.
to T-Mobile, in my example that I used
I
earlier,
mean, sometimes it depends on where you're at, but we live in Ohio, and Verizon is always the best connections. Verizon hotspots are, I mean, I've always had the best experience with those. Different cellular service providers have strengths in some areas, and they have weaknesses in other areas. But specifically, I know on the East Coast, Verizon rocks it out and is probably the preferred method.
I know that is a little bit of a tricky thing, just depending on where you are at. In this case here, if you're looking at the PowerPoint again, we did use a Verizon Jetpack and it worked just fine. But I have had clients who have called in and they moved from one field to another field, maybe 100 yards, and their hotspot just craps out on them. So really, I would check maybe with who's in your area. If it is AT&T and they seem to be the dominant force in your area with internet, probably go with them. If it's Verizon seems to be local in your area, then probably go with them too.
And you're looking at 2 gigs an hour. So that's about it.
So I think we are done with the questions. We'd just like to thank you guys all for tuning in and everything. And if you have any additional questions that you'd like to ask, always feel free to shoot them over to questions@boxcast.com. Or there is, you could shoot them to lena.kelly@boxcast.com, josh.clemens@boxcast.com, or wade.clark@boxcast.com.
And if you're interested in my up-and-coming music career, please reach out to me personally, too.
Please reach out to him on MySpace. So, alrighty, thank you guys.
All right, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next month.